Have you ever noticed yourself picking up your phone without really thinking? Not because you needed to check something, but simply out of habit, like your hand moved before your brain even had a chance to decide. It's such a tiny, everyday moment, so quick that most of the time we barely notice it. But if you stop and think about it, moments like this reveal a lot, not just about how we live, but also about why we live the way we do. Welcome back to Fluent English Journey, the channel where we explore meaningful ideas in natural, everyday English. Here, we don't just help you improve your language skills, we also help you think more clearly and understand yourself a little better. Today, we're going to talk about something that affects almost everyone, even if we don't always realize it. That something is dopamine. Now, you might be thinking, dopamine? Isn't that just some complicated science term? And yes, it's a chemical in your brain. But dopamine isn't just about biology. It's about behavior. It's about the ways we want things, get distracted, form habits, focus our attention, and even feel restless. It's about the invisible forces that pull us forward, leaving us wanting more notifications, more coffee, more achievements, more experiences. Think about your average day. How often do you check your phone without thinking? How often do you scroll through social media, open a bunch of tabs, or jump from one task to another, even if none of it really feels satisfying? There's a constant pull, isn't there? A quiet voice inside saying, maybe the next thing will feel better. That little whisper, that urge is dopamine at work. Here's something really interesting. Many people think dopamine is the chemical that makes us feel pleasure, that it appears after we get something we want. But actually, dopamine shows up before we get the reward. It doesn't say, that felt good. It says, go get it. Dopamine drives the chase, not the enjoyment itself. It's the force that makes us move toward what we desire, not what makes us feel satisfied once we have it. When you really understand the difference between wanting and having, a lot about your behavior suddenly starts to make sense. Why you keep scrolling, checking notifications, or switching tasks, now you can see it in a new light. So today, we're not going to focus only on the science of dopamine. Instead, we'll use it as a kind of lens, a way to understand ourselves better. Because in a world full of constant distractions, noise, and temptation, being able to pause, notice, and reflect is becoming more important than ever. It's not just helpful, it might even be essential. Here's a question for you to think about as we start. How much of what you do each day is guided by your conscious choice? And how much is just habit, routine, or impulse? When was the last time you stopped and asked yourself, why am I doing this? What am I hoping to feel? This episode isn't about blame or shame. It's not about stopping yourself from enjoying life or turning into some kind of perfectly disciplined robot. It's about awareness and curiosity. It's about noticing the little patterns, the cravings, the restlessness inside you, and asking better questions about them. Because once you notice, you can start to make small changes. And even tiny changes can give you more freedom in your life. You can move through your day with less stress, less force, and more intention. So let's begin, not with complicated science, rules, or strict advice, but with a deeper look into ourselves. Because understanding dopamine isn't just about learning how our brains work, it's about learning how we live. If you're paying attention right now, and you are, since you're reading this, then you're already tuning into one of the most important forces that quietly shapes almost everything you do. That force is called dopamine. But let's get real about it. I'm not talking about the clickbait version you see online, or the oversimplified dopamine is the pleasure chemical story. Forget the self-help videos promising to reset your brain in 7 days. Let's strip it down and see dopamine clearly. Something grounded in reality, but still easy to relate to. Here's the first and most important thing to know. Dopamine is not pleasure. I'll say it again, because this is huge. Dopamine is not the feeling of pleasure. It's not the warm, satisfied sensation you get when you eat your favorite dessert, get a compliment, or finally finish that big project that's been stressing you out. That feeling of satisfaction, that sense of, yes, I did it, comes from other chemicals in your brain, like serotonin, endorphins, or oxytocin. Dopamine is something different. Dopamine is about anticipation. It's about wanting. It's the force that pushes you toward those pleasurable experiences, not the experience itself. You can think of it as your brain's motivational fuel. It's the spark that says, something out there is worth going after. That next bite of dessert, that next episode of your favorite show, that next goal at work, it's all fueled by dopamine. Dopamine is future-focused. It's the whisper, or sometimes the shout, in your brain that says, go get it. You'll feel better once you have it. And the stronger the dopamine signal, the more urgent that message feels. Here's where it gets even more fascinating. Dopamine is basically a prediction machine. It doesn't care much about what's happening right now. Instead, it cares about what your brain expects will happen next. Let me give you an example. Imagine you walk into a cafe and smell fresh coffee. Your brain lights up immediately. You haven't even ordered the coffee yet. You haven't tasted it. But you want it. Why? Because your brain remembers that this smell usually means a pleasant experience is coming. The dopamine spike isn't about the coffee itself. It's about the possibility of the coffee. This is also why dopamine is so tied to learning. Every time you experience something rewarding, your brain remembers what happened just before the reward, the sights, the smells, the environment, even the time of day. The next time something similar happens, your brain sends out dopamine in advance, almost like a built-in encouragement system. Hey, this usually feels good. Let's go get it again. This mechanism is also how habits are formed. Not through logic, not through conscious decision-making, but through repetition and emotional memory. You experience something rewarding, your brain remembers the cues, dopamine motivates you to chase it again, and eventually it becomes automatic. But here's the tricky part. Dopamine is not always accurate. Sometimes it overestimates how rewarding something will be. You feel the craving, you go after it, you get it, and then feel a little disappointed. Not because what you got was bad, but because your brain predicted it would feel even better than it actually does. It's like chasing the high of a perfect memory and ending up with a watered-down version. And then what does your brain do? It says, try again. Maybe this time it'll feel better. That's how cycles of craving start, how habits deepen, and why we sometimes feel restless even when we get what we want. Scroll again, buy again, chase again. That's the loop. And if you've ever felt frustrated or restless in modern life, this is a big reason why. We live in a world full of things that promise instant gratification, fast food, quick likes on social media, endless scrolling, but most of the time, these things don't give us anything truly lasting. And yet, our brains, powered by dopamine, keep whispering, maybe the next thing will feel better. It's not your fault. This is how the system is designed, to keep you seeking, keep you curious, and keep you moving toward reward, whether that reward is meaningful or not. Here's something that might surprise you. Dopamine isn't only involved in the so-called bad habits, like endless scrolling or impulsive shopping. It's also at work in deeply positive, meaningful activities. Learning a new language, falling in love, creating art, solving a tough problem at work, all of these involve dopamine. Anytime you're working toward a reward in the future, dopamine is part of the process. So dopamine is not a villain. It's not something we need to eliminate or fight against. It's just part of how our biology works. And like any powerful tool, it can be used well or poorly, depending on how aware we are of its influence. Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Let that sink in. Because this is where understanding becomes power. If you know that dopamine is about prediction, craving, and movement, not satisfaction, you can start to notice the difference between the urge and the action. You can recognize that little voice saying, "I need this now," and ask yourself, do I really need it, or is this just the loop I've been trained to follow? And that space between craving and choice, that tiny pause, is where real change happens. That's where growth lives. Not in suppressing desire, but in understanding it. Not in rejecting dopamine, but in seeing it clearly and choosing how to respond. To sum it up in one line, dopamine doesn't make you feel good. It makes you want to feel good. And that small difference is huge. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between living on autopilot and living with intention. So what does a dopamine-driven life actually look like? Chances are you're already living it. Picture this. You wake up, check your phone before your feet even touch the floor. Notifications, messages, updates, just enough stimulation to kick your brain into motion. You scroll through a few short videos or reels, each quick and satisfying. Then you make coffee, maybe 2 cups. You open your email, respond to the easy messages, skip the harder ones. Through all of this, dopamine is quietly guiding your attention, nudging you from one thing to the next. And it's not necessarily bad, it's natural. But the question is, are you following it intentionally or just being pulled along? Here's a moment to reflect. When you feel that itch, that restlessness, that urge to reach for something, what are you really after? Is it pleasure, relief, escape, or connection? And are you chasing the right thing or just the next thing? Because once you start noticing these patterns, the world doesn't just look different, it feels different. And that, my friend, is where the shift begins. That's the start of moving from a dopamine-driven life on autopilot to a life with awareness and choice. Throughout the day, you might find yourself jumping between tabs, tasks, and conversations, always half here, half somewhere else. Hours pass and you're still working late, finishing things you promised yourself you'd start days ago. And then, at night, when you finally lie down in bed, you grab your phone again. Not because you're excited, not because there's something urgent, but because your brain is still looking for that little spark. One more scroll, one more post, one more hit of stimulation. Sound familiar? This is what a dopamine-driven life often looks like. It's the loop we fall into when we aren't fully aware of what's pulling our strings. It's not dramatic or dangerous, and in fact, it can feel completely normal. That's the tricky part. It feels like life itself. But when you look closer, it's often a life of chasing. Chasing goals, chasing feedback, chasing something better, newer, or more exciting, and yet, rarely feeling fully satisfied. Why? Because every time you catch the thing you were chasing, the satisfaction fades faster than you expected. And before you know it, your brain is already on to the next thing. Think about it. We chase likes, followers, and those little red notification bubbles on our screens. We chase promotions, recognition, new projects, or hobbies. Ambition and growth aren't bad, they're beautiful. But here's the irony. We rarely feel truly satisfied when we get what we were chasing. And this circles back to what we learned earlier. Dopamine doesn't reward achievement, it rewards anticipation. It gets excited before the finish line, not after. So by the time you reach the promotion, the purchase, or the praise, your brain is already moving on. It's like being on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. No matter how fast you run, you never quite feel like you've arrived. You see this everywhere. Take productivity culture, for example. We've been trained to feel guilty when we rest and proud when we're busy. Even if the busy work is meaningless, we glorify being always on as if stress were a badge of honor. But much of that drive doesn't come from clarity or purpose. It comes from the dopamine loop. That little thrill you get when you tick something off a to-do list or answer an email immediately. That's dopamine at work. But then what happens? The inbox refills, the to-do list grows again, and the satisfaction evaporates. It shows up in learning too. Maybe you've experienced this with language study. You set a goal, pass the next exam, finish a textbook, memorize 50 new words. When you achieve it, sure, it feels good for a moment. But then your brain asks, what's next? Often, even before finishing one goal, you're already planning the next one. That's dopamine again, rewarding momentum more than meaning. It's not just social media. It's not just overwork. It's the rhythm of modern life, fast, distracted, and achievement-oriented. And I'm not saying this to criticize anyone. I say it because I see it in myself too. So often I've jumped from one project to another, not because I needed to, but because the quiet space in between felt uncomfortable. That silence, the pause between things, feels uneasy, so we fill it with noise, notifications, or just one more thing. The real danger of a dopamine-driven life isn't addiction in the extreme sense. It's disconnection. When dopamine runs the show without awareness, the result isn't just wasted time, it's disconnection. Disconnection from being present, from acting with intention, and from experiencing joy that lasts longer than a few seconds. We get so used to chasing the next little spark that we forget how to feel at home in the here and now. It's like our attention has become fragmented, always reaching forward, never fully landing. And when that becomes our default, our days start to feel hollow, busy, but not full. Stimulating, but not satisfying. That's the cost of letting dopamine lead without awareness. It's not just about fleeting distractions. It's about losing depth. Losing the ability to stay with something long enough to experience the real reward that comes from mastery, intimacy, and true fulfillment. So maybe the question isn't just, what do I want? Maybe it's also, why do I want it? And more importantly, what happens after I get it? If the answer is always, I just move on to the next thing, then maybe the chase itself needs to be questioned. Because here's a truth that's hard to admit. Not all movement is progress. Sometimes we run in circles and call it growth. Think about your day. Maybe you reach for your phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes, or you stay up late working on a project you've already lost interest in, or you start a new habit just to feel productive. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what am I really chasing right now? Is this something I chose or something I've been conditioned to want? That tiny space of pause, that little moment of self-awareness, is the first step toward living not just a dopamine-driven life, but a conscious one. This is what I like to call chasing versus choosing, the inner split. Have you ever had one of those days where you get to the end and honestly can't remember what you did or why? You were busy, maybe even productive. But if someone asked what truly mattered in those hours, could you answer? It's strange. We move through so much of our day on autopilot, responding, reacting, reaching. We check our phones without thinking, reply to emails instantly, jump between tasks, and say yes to things we never actually chose. We're awake, alert even, but not present. We're following momentum, not intention. This is the tension I want to explore with you, the quiet but powerful pull between chasing and choosing. On one side is the part of us drawn to instant stimulation, quick wins, and external rewards. On the other side is the part that longs for deeper meaning, conscious intention, and real connection. Dopamine fuels desire. It's the spark that gets us moving. But not all movement is chosen, and not all action aligns with our values. Sometimes dopamine pulls us in one direction while our deeper self, the quieter, wiser voice inside, is pointing somewhere else. Imagine this. You're working on something meaningful, writing, learning, or planning something that really matters to you. You're focused, immersed. But suddenly, your phone buzzes. A notification lights up the screen. And just like that, your attention starts to shift. That little spark pulls you away from your deeper intention, and the inner split becomes real, chasing the immediate, quick reward versus choosing what truly matters. You feel that tiny jolt, a text, a notification, maybe a new comment on something you posted. Instantly, your attention shifts. You check it, then it leads to something else. And before you know it, you're watching your third video about a topic you weren't even thinking about 10 minutes ago. What happened there? You didn't consciously choose to abandon your focus. You were pulled away, not by force, but by habit, by the dopamine-driven part of your brain that whispers, "This will feel good. This will be quick. This will be easy." And in that moment, something inside you gave in. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Here's the bigger question. How often does that happen throughout your day? How many of your choices are actually choices, and how many are just patterns, conditioned responses, mental shortcuts? This isn't about guilt. It's not about being perfect or turning yourself into a hyper-disciplined machine. It's about awareness. It's about creating a little space to ask, am I acting from impulse or from intention? Am I chasing something because it genuinely aligns with my values or because it gives me a quick dopamine hit? That tiny moment of self-inquiry, that pause, is what separates living reactively from living intentionally. Let's go deeper. This inner split doesn't just appear with distractions. It shows up in our goals, our relationships, even our self-image. Sometimes we chase things we think we should want because we've been taught to want them: success, recognition, productivity, validation. But when we pause long enough to ask why we're chasing these things, the answers can feel blurry or even uncomfortable. Think about it. Have you ever reached a goal you worked hard for, something you thought would bring pride or fulfillment, and instead felt nothing? Or maybe even felt disappointed? That isn't failure. It's the result of chasing a life that wasn't chosen by your deeper self. It happens when we let external rewards or dopamine-fueled motivation take the wheel instead of listening to our inner compass. And that inner compass? It's quiet. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It shows up as intuition, unease, or that subtle voice saying, "This isn't it," even when everything on the outside looks perfect. Learning to listen to that voice, especially in a world full of distractions and constant stimulation, takes practice. It takes courage. But it also leads to something rare and powerful: alignment. When your actions match your values, your goals reflect your truth, and your habits support the life you actually want to live, that's where real satisfaction lives. Be honest with yourself. Dopamine isn't the enemy. It's not bad. It's part of how we're wired. It gets us out of bed, keeps us curious, and helps us pursue meaningful things. The problem isn't dopamine. The problem is letting it run the show without question, confusing craving with purpose, chasing one thing after another, thinking that the next achievement, project, or ping of excitement will finally bring satisfaction. But here's the truth: real satisfaction doesn't come from the chase. It comes from choice. From living in a way that reflects who you truly are, not just what your brain wants in the moment. So here's the reflection I want to leave you with today. How much of your daily behavior is truly intentional? And how much is just momentum, not just in your work or habits, but in your relationships, decisions, and even the way you spend your time? When was the last time you truly paused, really paused, and asked yourself, is this mine? Is this choice coming from me or from a pattern I've never questioned? The more you notice the split between chasing and choosing, the more freedom you have. Freedom to respond instead of react, to make deliberate choices instead of drifting, to design your life rather than let it just happen to you. That quiet moment of clarity is where transformation begins. Let's talk about addiction, distraction, and the illusion of reward. Living in today's world is like navigating a minefield of distractions. Imagine walking through a city where every billboard, shop window, and street corner is shouting for your attention. Now imagine that city is in your pocket, on your laptop, and in your living room. These distractions don't just shout, they sing to your brain, promising quick hits of pleasure and satisfaction. And here's the truth. Many of these signals are deliberately designed to hijack the very system dopamine controls. This is where addiction, distraction, and the illusion of reward all intersect. They all run on the same engine, dopamine. Take social media as an example. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook are designed to keep you hooked. Every like, comment, or notification releases a tiny burst of dopamine, a hit your brain learns to crave. But here's the catch. This reward isn't steady or reliable. It's unpredictable, like a slot machine. You never know when the next jackpot will come, so you check again and again. This unpredictability sends your dopamine system into overdrive. You crave more, chase more, want more, even when the actual content brings little joy or meaning. It's not just social media either. Think about productivity culture. We live in a world where being busy is often equated with being valuable or successful. But behind this cultural ideal lies a hidden dynamic. Productivity apps, constant email alerts, and the pressure to be always on exploit our dopamine-driven desire for achievement and recognition. Every small task completed, every quick win, triggers a tiny dopamine spike. It motivates us to push harder, check more boxes, and avoid downtime. Here's the tricky part. These quick rewards are often superficial. They create the illusion of progress. You feel productive, but sometimes that feeling is just a distraction from deeper, more meaningful work that requires focus, patience, and sustained effort. And because dopamine rewards anticipation more than completion, your brain keeps pushing you to start the next thing before you've even enjoyed the last. Digital overstimulation has become the norm. Our brains, which evolved for slower-paced, natural environments, are now flooded with fast, flashing stimuli. This constant bombardment doesn't just scatter our attention, it reshapes our internal dialogue and thought patterns. We become more impulsive, more reactive, and less able to tolerate boredom or silence. Even the simple act of sitting quietly with your thoughts, once a pathway to creativity, insight, and focus, now feels uncomfortable. The stillness feels empty because our brains are so used to chasing the next spark, the next hit, the next tiny dopamine boost. Sitting quietly with your thoughts now feels uncomfortable, even painful. But this isn't a failure of willpower. It's a natural response to a system designed to keep us engaged and, yes, dependent. In this environment, staying focused isn't just difficult, it's almost a radical act of rebellion. Choosing to unplug, to slow down, to resist the lure of endless dopamine hits, that's where real power lies. It's about reclaiming your attention and, with it, your life. And this brings us to something crucial: empathy. Many of us struggle with distraction and compulsive behaviors, not because we're lazy or weak, but because we're human beings trying to navigate an environment designed against our well-being. Understanding this doesn't excuse mindless scrolling or overwork, but it does invite compassion toward ourselves and toward others. It opens the door to kinder self-reflection instead of harsh judgment. So, what can we do? The first step is awareness, noticing how dopamine loops operate and how modern culture exploits them. The next step is intentionality, making choices that nurture your attention instead of constantly giving it away. Intentionality can take many forms. It might mean turning off notifications for a while, scheduling phone-free moments during your day, or simply allowing yourself to be bored, to sit with silence and see what comes up. Because in that space, free from constant stimulation, you give your brain a chance to reset. You create room for reflection, creativity, and calm, things that dopamine-driven distractions often crowd out. In a world engineered to hijack our attention, choosing to focus is a profound act. It's a step toward freedom from compulsive chasing, from shallow rewards, from living on the surface. And that freedom opens the door to a richer, more intentional life. So next time you find yourself reaching for your phone or jumping into the next task without thinking, pause. Remember, your attention is precious. Protect it, nourish it, and above all, own it. Because that's where the truth about dopamine really lies, not in the chemical itself, but in how we choose to respond to it. Now, having seen how dopamine can pull us into patterns of distraction and endless chasing, the question naturally arises: can we change this? Can we reshape the way our brains respond to rewards, break free from compulsive impulses, and build habits that actually support who we want to be? The good news is yes. Our brains are remarkably adaptable, a quality neuroscientists call neuroplasticity. It's the brain's ability to form new connections and pathways in response to experience. Even if you've spent years reacting automatically to dopamine-driven impulses, it's never too late to change the story. At the heart of this transformation is a powerful principle: delayed gratification. This is the ability to resist immediate pleasure in favor of more meaningful, lasting rewards in the future. It's not easy, especially in our fast-paced, stimulation-heavy world, but every time you pause before acting on an impulse, you strengthen your brain's self-control circuits. Every time you resist an impulse, you're training yourself to choose intention over reaction. Think of it like voting. Each small decision, maybe not checking your phone during a meeting or not reaching for that snack out of boredom, is a vote for the person you want to become. It's not about perfection. It's about consistent, small choices that add up over time, like compound interest, but for your brain. Another essential idea here is intrinsic motivation. That's the kind of motivation that comes from within. Instead of chasing rewards imposed by the outside world, likes, praise, money, or status, intrinsic motivation connects you to activities that feel meaningful or enjoyable in themselves. For example, learning English because you genuinely love the language and culture, not just to pass an exam. Exercising because you want to feel strong and alive, not just to look a certain way. When your motivation is intrinsic, your dopamine system works differently. It rewards the process, the journey, not just the finish line. This kind of motivation builds resilience. It helps you stay engaged even when external rewards fade or progress slows down, which, as we know, always happens at some point. So how do you start rewiring your habits? One effective approach is to make the new behavior easier and more rewarding. For example, if you want to reduce social media use, don't just tell yourself, don't check Instagram. Instead, create small but powerful barriers. Turn off notifications or leave your phone in another room during focused work. At the same time, replace the old habit with something positive, maybe reading a chapter of a book or stepping outside for a short walk. This idea is called habit stacking, linking a new, intentional habit onto an existing routine. It works with your brain's love for patterns and predictability. Over time, your dopamine system starts associating the new habit with positive feelings, making it easier to maintain. But be patient with yourself. Rewiring takes time. Your brain naturally resists change because it's wired to seek comfort and familiarity. You might slip back into old patterns, and that's perfectly normal. What matters is noticing the slip without judgment and gently returning to your intention. Reflection is a powerful tool here. Pay attention to your internal dialogue. Are you saying, "I can't do this," or "I'm too distracted"? Or are you saying, "This is hard, but I'm learning," or "Each small choice counts"? The stories we tell ourselves shape our reality. By cultivating a growth mindset, seeing challenges as opportunities to learn, you build the resilience needed for lasting change. Another tip: celebrate small wins mindfully. Instead of chasing instant gratification through meaningless distractions, recognize the quiet satisfaction that comes from sticking to your intention. From completing a focused work session. From saying no to a quick dopamine hit in favor of something deeper. Ultimately, rewiring your reward system is about reclaiming your agency. It's about taking back control of your attention, your choices, and your life, one intentional moment at a time. It's about turning down the volume on external noise and tuning into your inner compass. When you do this, you build a foundation for a life driven less by impulse and more by purpose. So the next time you feel that familiar pull to act on impulse, try this. Pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, is this choice helping me become the person I want to be? If the answer is yes, go for it. If not, know that by resisting, by choosing differently, you're reshaping your brain, one small vote at a time. And remember, this isn't about perfection or sheer willpower. It's about kindness. Kindness to yourself as you grow, change, and evolve. Because the truth about dopamine isn't just about a chemical in your brain. It's about how you engage with it, how you choose to live with it, and how every moment offers an opportunity to build the life you truly want. There's a kind of pleasure that doesn't spike, it settles. It doesn't flood your system in a quick burst only to disappear, leaving you craving more. Instead, it quietly grows, deepens, and stays with you like the soft glow of a candle in a dark room or the warmth of a slow-burning fire on a cold night. Have you felt it lately? In a world obsessed with instant gratification and constant stimulation, this kind of pleasure can feel elusive, almost like a secret hidden behind layers of distraction and noise. Yet it's exactly this pleasure, the pleasure of presence, of deep focus, of slow living, that holds the key to sustainable satisfaction and meaningful happiness. You may have heard the term deep work, popularized by Cal Newport. Deep work means engaging in activities that require intense focus and stretch your cognitive abilities without interruption. Think of writing a thoughtful essay, learning a new language, or solving a complex problem. Deep work isn't just about productivity, it's about presence. When you're fully immersed in a task, time feels different, more expansive, richer. You're not chasing quick dopamine hits. You're cultivating a steady, satisfying flow of engagement. This experience connects to the pleasure of enough, the feeling you get when you've truly given your attention to something that matters to you. Not rushed, not fragmented attention, but calm, undistracted presence. This pleasure doesn't scream for more. It whispers contentment. Why does this matter? Dopamine-driven pleasures, those sharp spikes of excitement, can leave us feeling empty or restless once the high fades. The pleasure of enough, on the other hand, builds resilience. It roots us in the moment and nourishes our sense of self. Stillness plays a big role here. In our culture, stillness is often mistaken for boredom or laziness, but it's actually a fertile space for creativity and self-discovery. Sitting quietly without scrolling or switching tasks gives your brain time to rest and reset. This slow pace reconnects you with your internal dialogue, your deeper values, and the subtle pleasures life offers. Slow living, a lifestyle that values quality over quantity, depth over speed, invites you to savor experiences instead of consuming them rapidly. It teaches patience, presence, and the ability to enjoy the quiet satisfaction that comes from being fully engaged in the moment. This approach challenges the assumption that constant busyness equals success. Instead, it encourages intentionality, mindfulness, and the joy of simple, everyday moments. Imagine savoring a cup of tea, feeling its warmth in your hands, tasting each sip with full attention. Or walking in nature, noticing the patterns of light and shadow, the texture of leaves, the rhythm of your breath. These moments may seem small, but over time, they accumulate, nourishing a more grounded, lasting joy. This doesn't mean rejecting technology or ambition. Rather, it's about balancing the dopamine-driven chase with practices that cultivate presence and satisfaction. You can still pursue goals and embrace modern life. But by integrating deep work and mindful pauses, you create a more sustainable rhythm, one that honors both your brain's chemistry and your soul's need for calm. Here's an invitation. The next time you find yourself rushing to the next task or reaching for your phone out of habit, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself, what if I slowed down? What if I gave this moment my full attention? How might the pleasure of enough feel in my life? The truth is, this kind of pleasure is accessible to all of us. It doesn't require new gadgets or endless to-do lists. It asks only for our willingness to be present, to choose depth over distraction, meaning over noise. By doing this, you reclaim a kind of freedom that dopamine spikes alone cannot offer. You discover that satisfaction isn't a distant destination, but a gentle companion on the journey. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth about dopamine, not that it controls us, but that we have the power to balance its influence with presence, intention, and the quiet joy of enough. Now, let's talk about listening to your inner compass. When was the last time you asked yourself a simple yet profound question? What am I really hungry for? Not just in the literal sense, but in a deeper, more personal way. What desires, values, or needs stir inside you when the noise of everyday life quiets down for a moment? In a culture saturated with distractions and dopamine-driven impulses, tuning into our inner compass often takes a back seat. We get swept along by habits, external expectations, and the relentless pursuit of fleeting rewards. Yet beneath all that surface activity lies a voice waiting to be heard, your internal dialogue, your true self, your inner compass. Listening to this compass means creating space for self-awareness. It's about becoming curious about your thoughts, feelings, and motivations without rushing to judge or fix them. Instead of acting on autopilot, you begin to recognize the subtle signals your mind and body send you. Are you reaching for your phone because you're bored or anxious? Are you working late because you're chasing approval or because the project truly excites you? These distinctions matter because they reveal whether your actions align with your deeper values or are merely reactions to external pressures. Self-awareness also invites us to examine limiting beliefs, those internal stories that quietly shape our choices. For example, you might tell yourself, "I'm not disciplined enough to focus," or "I don't have time for stillness." These statements aren't facts, they're stories. Once you bring them to light, you can challenge and reframe them. This process leads to greater agency, the power to act intentionally rather than impulsively, to choose a life aligned with your true values instead of one dictated by distraction and dopamine-driven impulses. When you understand what truly matters to you, your decisions naturally start reflecting those priorities. You become less reactive to dopamine-driven urges and more responsive to your inner values and long-term goals. So how do you cultivate this connection with your inner compass? One simple way is through regular reflection. This could be journaling your thoughts at the end of the day, taking mindful walks without your phone, or practicing meditation or deep breathing. These moments of stillness help you listen, not just to the sounds around you, but to the quiet wisdom within. Another powerful tool is asking open-ended questions. Questions like, "What am I really hungry for?" Or, "When was the last time I felt truly alive, connected, or satisfied?" These questions aren't about finding quick answers. Instead, they invite exploration, opening the door to deeper self-understanding. This journey isn't always easy. It requires patience, compassion, and courage. Facing your true desires and fears can feel vulnerable, but it also offers the chance to live more authentically, aligned with your own path instead of following a script shaped by culture or habit. As you tune into your inner compass, your relationship with dopamine begins to shift. Instead of being pulled blindly by cravings, you start to see dopamine as a tool, a signal that guides you toward what is meaningful, rather than as a tyrant controlling your actions. This perspective creates space for resilience, growth, and intentional living. When life feels overwhelming or your dopamine system tempts you to escape into distraction, you can pause and reconnect with what you truly want. That moment of awareness is powerful. It reminds you that you are not just a passive passenger on the dopamine-driven ride, but an active navigator of your life. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I really hungry for? Not the surface desires shaped by habit or culture, but the deeper hunger for connection, meaning, peace, or purpose. What values light up your internal compass? Listening to your inner voice is a practice, a daily conversation with yourself. Some days will feel clearer than others, and that's okay. What matters is that you keep showing up, willing to listen and choose. Ultimately, the truth about dopamine is just one part of a larger truth about yourself. You have the capacity to create a life rich with intention, depth, and fulfillment by learning to hear, trust, and follow your inner compass. Maybe the truth about dopamine isn't about cutting things out, harsh restrictions, sudden detoxes, or brutal willpower battles. Perhaps it's something more subtle, more human, and ultimately more powerful. It's about the space between the craving and the choice, that small, often overlooked moment when you feel the pull, the sudden urge to check your phone, scroll endlessly, grab another bite, or say yes to something you don't really want. In that brief pause lies a world of possibility. There's a space between craving and action, a place where awareness can grow, where impulse doesn't automatically become action. In a way, that space is where freedom lives. Not the freedom to do whatever you want all the time, but the freedom to choose who you want to be, moment by moment. Dopamine isn't just a chemical hijacking your brain. It's a signal, a messenger. And if you learn to listen carefully, it can tell you what you truly need or desire. What if, instead of being driven blindly by spikes of pleasure or distraction, you saw these moments as invitations? Invitations to pause, breathe, and ask, What is this craving trying to tell me? Which choice aligns with my deeper values? This isn't easy. The mind is used to rushing forward, reacting, and grabbing for quick hits. But with practice, that space widens, the pause grows longer, and your inner dialogue becomes a gentle guide instead of a harsh critic. Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path offers immediate gratification, the familiar comfort of dopamine-driven rewards. The other leads to something slower, perhaps uncertain, but richer and more fulfilling in the long run. Choosing that path isn't about denying pleasure, it's about recognizing a different kind of pleasure, the kind that settles, nourishes, and lasts. It's about resilience over exhaustion, presence over distraction, authenticity over autopilot. Every time you choose differently, you reshape your brain. You teach your dopamine system that reward isn't just about the next quick hit, but about meaning, intention, and growth. So, as we end this conversation about dopamine, I invite you to carry this thought. Between every craving and every choice lies a moment of freedom, a moment that is yours. What will you do with that moment? Will you rush ahead or pause to listen? Will you follow old patterns or explore new possibilities? Will you chase fleeting impulses or trust your inner compass? There is no single answer, no perfect way. Life is messy, beautiful, and complicated. But within that messiness, you have the power to create a life that reflects your true self, not one dictated by chemical impulses, but shaped by conscious intention. Thank you for spending this time with me on Fluent English Journey. I hope this episode has given you more than just knowledge about dopamine. It has offered a space to reflect, question, and perhaps choose differently. Remember, the journey toward understanding yourself is ongoing. Each moment is an opportunity to listen more deeply, act more wisely, and live more fully. Until next time, take care of your mind, be kind to your heart, and find peace in the space between craving and choice.